what I find interesting about the fall 2020 is that so many faculty have taken on this brave new world of online synchronous classes, something that they would have never imagined before. But what I see is that a lot of people are finding creative ways to do that group work, that dialogue work. And so I asked Cheryl to be here today to talk about how she balances all this technology to create this conversation in her class and solve problems in her class. So Cheryl, do you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Wicker. I'm a fairly new instructor here at UNCG. I'm a nurse practitioner with about 25 years of experience, a little over 25 years at this point. And I actually recently got my DNP here at UNCG and was recruited to a certain extent to come and teach for the program, the DNP program. I really love it. So I am a clinical instructor for the adult geriatric nurse practitioner program here at UNCG. It's a doctoral program, so we are our hands in a lot of different things. But one of the things that I do is I teach third year clinical students. This is their last year of clinical, and I worry a lot at the very beginning about whether they're getting all the concepts that we need them to get before they go out and practice.
So I've sat in a couple of nursing classes, these higher level nursing classes. And as someone who's not a nursing instructor or student, they're very overwhelming, but there's lots of problems that you introduce and you have lots of conversations. You have times where they sit down in groups and try to solve the problems together, then come back. So there's lots of group work in every class, and there's lots of times to solve problems in every class. So I have found lots of inspiration from you, Cheryl, that you have found a way to use Zoom for online synchronous classes, but you're balancing so many different technologies at one time. So you are using Zoom for breakout rooms. You are showing your PowerPoint and polling through Zoom. You're giving students a Google Doc, which is evolving. And then you're using a Jamboard, which is part of the Google suite of tools that all faculty have access to, and it's like an interactive whiteboard. So I was hoping that, Cheryl, you could talk us through and show us using the screen share how you get students from beginning to end of this process.
Yeah, sure. What I did initially, and I think this is really important, I had Google Doc and I have the Jamboard as the major interactive tools that the students are supposed to use. So I thought this was really important. A week before class, I sent them a link to say, we are all going to be working together on a Google Doc. Here's the link to it. And we're going to be working together on a Jamboard. And here's the link to it. I will put you in groups and we will interact with the Jamboard with our groups. And then you'll have the Google Doc there. So I sent those links a week ahead of time. And then, of course, some people, I'd say about maybe half the class is all in there and they have the Jamboard and they have the Google Doc before the class starts. Of course, there's half of them that don't. So what I did is the day before, I sent them another link. And then I also, in chat, I made the links again once we got together in Zoom. And I learned that the hard way. In the past, at the very beginning, when I was trying to create interactive things where they had a Google Doc, for example, they're supposed to interact with, they'd be like, what, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know where to find it. So this is really just to keep that down at a minimum.
Okay.
Usually there's somebody in the group who can. So what I did is I sent that ahead of time. And so then what I did is we had here is my PowerPoint, and we had a PowerPoint presentation talking about diagnostic reasoning and the power of what we call a problem representation, which is a one-sentence summary of a patient's condition. This is work that they have done previously in simulation and telling me about how well they did in differential diagnoses, and these are about 7 different cases here, showing, hey, we're not doing as well in making our differentials as we could. So this is kind of the why of the problem representation, is to reduce diagnostic errors, and it's to help with communication, and it's help us to practice deductive reasoning. So we really needed to have this deductive reasoning, this type 2 process, and trying to do this as a class. Now I have to say, I did this as an asynchronous module. However, I got some assignments back, which made me feel, hey, they weren't quite getting it. So I felt like we needed to bring this back as a group ahead of time. So we kind of went through the whys and what the problem representation was all about, how this leads to one's differential diagnoses. And then this started the Google Doc. Now this course slide is way too busy. So I pretty much stopped right there. And then this is when they were supposed to interact with their Google Doc. And what I did is I came back. I'm going to stop sharing right here and put them all into groups. And then their group instructions were to look from their Google Doc, develop a 1-sentence problem representation, and then go to their link on Jamboard, and go to their link on Jamboard, and they're going to interact with that link. Now before, and then they had specific instructions. I also found it really helpful to start with, okay, how you make edits in Jamboard is the upper right hand corner, you pick edit, they're all going to be able to figure out, but it also helps reduce a certain amount of anxiety to just kind of going through the steps of what they're going to do. Make sure you make that short and sweet. Because they know more than I do. In fact, I got kind of stuck I believe, in this one, and I was trying to figure out how to scroll up or down, and then they had to tell me how to do it. So, but I had this, set up for group 1, group 2, group 3, 4, and 5. And what I did is I took away the group 1 and group 2 sentences that they wrote, and I left up here the group 3, 4, and 5 sentences, about how they've all put in a sentence. And then what we did is we went back to Zoom, and I did a polling question. Based on, there's my I also did a slide of instructions. And then I did a polling question. You know what? I think I told you, Amy, that I did have a polling question on this slide, and I did not.
You're fine, but that makes sense that you would show the question on the screen, and then you would use the Zoom features to ask the question. So I think we can imagine a poll question there pretty easily.
Yeah, and so basically what the question was, which problem representation do you like the best? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And we did a polling question on that, and they voted. So then we went back to Jamboard and picked, and you can see the sentence wouldn't have been my choice, but that's fine. It was their choice. And then the sentence was, we put up into a different color, and then we say, we saved that, and that was going to be what we work from. And then ideally they would have gone, so then ideally they also were supposed to come when their groups come up with a differential. Then we talked about, as a group, how we're gonna rank those differentials based on the information we knew. Then what we did is we added on to our Google Doc. Again, the Google Doc was iterative, and I will share that with you, though I will tell you I did not use that Google Doc past. So we added, each section here where I have a line, it's something that, like here down the line, I added something. So then I said, okay, now let's re-rank the differential based on some of that new information and integrate that into your problem representation. What does your problem representation look like now? And then we added objective information. What does it look like now? Then we added your lab information. And ideally, probably I would have had them keep on going back to their groups where they have discussed this. We lack some time here. And so what I did is I had them interact with me through chat at that point. One thing that's really important to know, that as you're sharing your screen, and I'm sure most of you have discovered this already, you can't see chat.
Right.
It's really helpful to have a specific student monitor chat for you.
Right. So you mentioned you started this process asynchronously and it's evolved into this. So are you seeing a difference in their understanding of your concepts now?
I do think that they are. I did get some assignments back, and they were very clear. The assignment was to present the patient and then do a write-up of their patient presentation. They were supposed to be very clear about what the problem representation was. And they all had, as opposed to my first group of assignments, but they all had a very clear problem representation. And they all had the idea of explaining how their differentials arose from that one sentence problem representation.
So this process is really helping your students develop those skills that you're looking for.
Yes. That deductive reasoning skills is which I'm really trying to develop. And it's a really hard concept to understand. Nurses are inductive in their reasoning in general, especially experienced nurses. So that inductive reasoning comes from the idea of recognizing patterns within your patient in order to make decisions or make conclusions. And a lot of nurses will go for gut feelings, which are often right.
Mm-hmm.
And we often correct a lot of potential emergencies because we go with our gut instincts a lot. Well, as new nurse practitioners, we have to step back because we have a lot of unfamiliar content. We have to figure out, okay, we're making medical diagnoses now. That's different for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to learn the deductive reasoning process, but also keep those inductive skills. And, at the same time that we are learning that deductive reasoning process, I'm trying to encourage, you can still use some of that inductive stuff, those inductive things, and really to kind of give examples of how somebody might be using inductive reasoning. For example, I had a student who talked about numbness, bilateral hands, and ended up being probably a Raynaud's syndrome. But she said, oh, I had multiple sclerosis in my differential because I had a patient with bilateral hand numbness who had that exact same symptom. So that is more that inductive reasoning.
Okay.
Oh, I've seen this pattern before. This is what it is. And as nurses have a hard time getting out of that. At least I did when I first became, as an experienced nurse, and I first became a nurse practitioner. But I also find that all of my students really kind of want to say, oh, my instinct is this, often right. But we also need to know that deductive reasoning.
So your students are going through a process to learn, but you've also gone through a process to embrace these different technologies. So there's faculty out there who are using Zoom, but maybe are not embracing and using all these tools for group work at the same time because they're a little worrisome about managing it all. So could you speak to that about how you overcame that?
So a lot of it was really just going to a lot of the workshops that we had over the summer and learning that experienced teachers didn't know how to use some of this technology either. I could have assumed, oh yeah, everybody's going to figure out a way to get classroom engagement and that sort of thing. And realizing that, that a lot of us are really just kind of playing around with these new technology and finding out what's worked. And I realized, that's okay. And as a new teacher, it's kind of what I do anyway in the classroom. I'm experimenting around with different teaching techniques and finding out which sticks better or where the students can retain more information.
Fantastic. So any new horizons or new tools that you're thinking about adding to the mix in the future? Or are you at capacity now?
I think would be really good is, for example, this Google Doc can be translated to an actual patient who presents the HPI, and then we can have a more interactive video session with a actual patient actor maybe, and then the students can get experience with how do you go ahead and do a physical assessment on this video interaction. So I think that would be a really great way to add, and it's a great way to add simulation in an era where we actually need more simulation in our clinical practice, especially during COVID.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing how you juggle all these different technologies, but it sounds like it's really helping your students a great deal. Any kind of last thoughts or best practices you want to share with everyone else?
Yeah, I think one thing is just to get in and start practicing sharing your screen, switching from one Google Doc to another, switching to your PowerPoint presentation. And I would really encourage people just just to practice that first. And if they have a friend they want to practice on, that would be great as well. It just gives you extra confidence to figure out how to do that. I also found that if I organized it ahead of time, as far as organizing my students so they can make the easily to find documents, like warning them a week before, a day before, and then during the time, it also organized my thoughts. And I could do a better job with presenting it.